Montblanc is a name you'd usually associate with luxury pens, fine leather, and timeless design. But now, the century-old brand is going from pens to pixels, stepping into the world of e-ink tablets. And that's not just unexpected, it's actually really fascinating. Because unlike other pen makers that offer digital accessories, Montblanc is the first legacy company to fully enter the space with its own custom-built tablet and stylus combo. It's luxury gone digital, and with a price tag that makes you wonder if it's meant for CEOs only. The first e-ink device promises to blend the elegance of traditional handwriting with modern tech. But does it actually deliver a premium note-taking experience, or is it just a luxury badge on average hardware? Let's take a close look. The luxury experience starts right at the unboxing. The heavy box features these beveled text elements that immediately set the tone. And once you slide the inner section out of the outer shell, that premium feel continues. The whole thing opens like a book. With the front cover you can lift open, really leaning into that analog-inspired experience. And that first look, with the pen taking center stage by covering the tablet, makes it immediately clear where this is coming from. Montblanc is a luxury pen company, and they're making a statement with this setup. So even before you power on the tablet, it's already obvious how the company wants to frame the entire experience. With a weight of roughly 435 grams without the pen, which by the way is roughly 20 grams heavier than officially listed in the manual, the tablet is on the heavier side. But even in its paper wrap, you can tell it's very thin. With just under 5 mm, it's one of the slimmest designs in the e-ink note-taking market. There's also a braided USB-C cable and 2 replacement nibs with different hardness levels in the box. I'll come back to that a bit later. Taking the tablet out of the paper wrap, I have to say, Montblanc really nailed the premium feel. The device has a full metal body that feels incredibly sturdy, better than comparable devices like the Kindle Scribe or Booksnote Air series. The sharp edges could be a bit more rounded for my taste, but still, there's no denying that this was built with quality first in mind. On the left side of the display is a leather inlay where the pen is placed for charging and storage. This is a very similar setup to what we saw on the Lenovo Smart Paper, but I'd say it's more refined on the Montblanc digital paper. The leather also helps offset the sharp edges I mentioned earlier, making the overall feel in the hand a bit more comfortable. And in case you're wondering, yes, you can also rotate the tablet 180 degrees to use it comfortably as a lefty. The USB-C connector is on the bottom side of the sidebar, the power button on the top. The bezel around the display has this gray color tone, which aims to get close to the color tone of the e-ink display. Very similar to how the Remarkable 2 is doing it. On the back, the Montblanc digital paper has 4 rubber feet, so it doesn't slide around the desk easily when writing. That's a small but important feature I always appreciate in a writing tablet. There are 3 different colors available, each with its own combination of inlay and frame colors. I chose the black version, which I like the most visually, and it's probably the least sensitive to showing dirt over time. But the back of the device is incredibly prone to smudges. That's probably a bit better on the lighter colored frames. That's an issue you won't have with the optionally available folios, which also cover the pen, same as we saw on the Lenovo Smart Paper. It's a good solution for keeping the device and pen secure while transporting them. However, I didn't get a cover because after already paying the premium price for the tablet, I just wasn't willing to spend another 200 euros for the folio. But of course, that's something you know beforehand. And that's a price you quite literally have to pay when going for the luxury brand solution. I'll come back to pricing a bit later. When it comes to value for money, I'd say the pen itself was a bit of a letdown, to be completely honest. From a company that makes 1,000 euro pens with just 17 grams, this one feels too lightweight and way too plasticky. Definitely not what I expected. It comes in the box, but you can also buy it separately for a hefty 270 euros, which is simply too expensive given the cheap haptic feel. Now you might think I have no clue what I'm talking about, judging a luxury pen maker this harshly for, well, their digital pen. And you'd be right. I actually don't own a Montblanc pen and I'm not their usual target audience, so I can't compare it with the typical offerings. But I do own pretty much every EMR pen you can get. And there are others, like Supernote's 30 grams heavy heart of metal pen, that are much cheaper and feel a lot better to hold in the hand if you ask me. But that might just be me, and a matter of taste. So take that with a grain of salt. One of the reasons the company went with a plastic build was probably the need to wirelessly charge the pen. Because this isn't using EMR technology, but AES. That stands for Active Electrostatic, which uses the capacitive layer of the touchscreen instead of relying on a separate one. So that's a different protocol than USI. This AES approach has both upsides and downsides. The upside is that the display stack can be reduced, providing a closer pen-to-pixel distance. You're also able to do a bit more with the pen itself. And Montblanc has actually implemented a couple of smart features here. There's a rocker button built into the side of the pen, and the top functions as a separate button as well, each with different actions. I'll talk more about what those do when we get to the software. The downside of using AES is that you lose compatibility with the many EMR styluses on the market, and the pen has to be charged. But to be fair, that's probably not a huge issue here. I mean, if you're buying a Montblanc digital paper device, it's very likely because of the brand, not because you are planning to use your existing EMR pens with it. In the case of the Montblanc digital pen, charging is done quickly and easily by just placing the pen into the spot in the leather-lined sidebar. The pen is held in place magnetically and very securely, so carrying it around like that, even without the folio, shouldn't be an issue. There's also the option to attach the pen to the side, but because it's a bit thicker than your typical digital stylus and the tablet itself is so thin, that's not really the most secure or useful option. Charging the pen also only works when it's placed in the sidebar. Turning on the Montblanc digital paper, we're immediately greeted by the language selection screen, and right away it reflects the level of polish and refinement we can expect from this device. I wasn't in touch with Montblanc for this review, but according to someone on Reddit who claims to have worked on the project, the tablet was developed completely from scratch, without involvement of any of the usual e-ink manufacturers like Books, BeatMe or Remarkable. And based on what we've seen so far, that does seem to be true. The experience feels distinct from anything else on the market. I did run into a small hiccup during setup. The app running the process froze and I had to start over. But after that, everything went smoothly and as expected. You're given the option to create and log into a Montblanc cloud account. There's not much detail about this on the main product page, but the support documentation clarifies that all data is encrypted on the device, during transfer, and in the cloud, which is great to see. And since the servers are located in Germany, this might actually be one of the most privacy-conscious setups in the e-ink note-taking space right now. Now, before we get into the software and writing experience, let's quickly talk about the specs and the fact that Montblanc doesn't exactly make them easy to find. There's barely any technical detail on the official product page, no processor model, no RAM, no display specs, which is pretty surprising for a digital device, especially at this price point. But it also makes it clear that Montblanc is focusing more on the user experience than the technical side of digital note-taking. Some basics are tucked away in the safety manual, where we find that the model number is DWT01. Probably short for digital writing tablet. It also lists 4 gigs of RAM, a 3700 mAh battery, a lockdown Android 13 as the operating system, and a 10.3-inch e-ink display with 300 ppi. Based on the person active on Reddit I mentioned before, it's likely using e-ink Carta 1300. The CPU isn't mentioned anywhere officially. But again, according to Reddit and what I could gather from the Windows Device Manager when connected via USB, it appears to be a MediaTek octa-core chip. I haven't confirmed the exact model, but performance isn't record-breaking and some actions take a moment to come into effect. It's especially noticeable with larger notebooks that can take a moment to load, and I even managed to crash the Notes app when not waiting for the device to finish loading and starting to do stuff. So I'd say performance overall is okay for most tasks, and the digital paper feels responsive enough for the use cases this device is made for, but compared to the market leaders, there's definitely a difference, and there's also a bit of fine-tuning needed when it comes to larger notebooks. Also when it comes to exporting them, which I'll come to later. The internal storage is 64 gigs, of which around 17 gigs are reserved for the operating system. But there's something else going on. Because when attaching the tablet via USB to the PC, it says that out of the remaining 47.6 gigs, 46 gigs are already occupied. I suspect the system is partitioned in a way to provide more space for the encrypted files. And moving files to the device is also a bit unusual, with 2 folders being available for imports and exports. Putting files into the import folder will move them automatically somewhere else, so you can't access the files from a Windows file system anymore. It also looks like it only allows files with a maximum size of 100 megabytes, which might be too little for certain PDF documents. One more side note I found interesting. The tablet is manufactured in Vietnam, which is becoming a growing hub for electronics manufacturing. And unless I'm mistaken, this might actually be the only e-ink tablet currently not made in China. The display size is 10.3 inches, and Montblanc is using e-ink Carta 1300. Currently the best technology available in the e-ink space. The 300 ppi resolution is as sharp and crisp as we've come to expect from other high-end devices. Just like some of its competitors, such as Supernote, Viwoods, or certain Books models, there's no built-in Frontlight here. That clearly shows Montblanc's focus on delivering a paper-like experience to reduce pen-to-pixel distance as much as possible and to retain a more paper-like experience. And while I understand and appreciate that goal, I'll be honest, Personally, I would have preferred to have a Frontlight. It just improves usability in dimmer lighting conditions, which is a real-world consideration for many users. One of the most common questions I get when a new e-ink device launches is, how bright is the background? Using my standard spectrophotometer test, the Montblanc digital paper scored an L-star value of 67. Right in line with other devices in this category. For context, the Supernote Manta scores 66, the Viwood's AI paper 69, and the Booksco 10.3 lands at 65. The higher the number, the brighter the background appears. So the differences here are marginal. The same goes for black levels. All eink Carta 1300 devices tend to hover around an L-star value of 27, with only minor variants. The one exception is the Booksco 10.3, which uses Carta 1200 and achieves a slightly deeper black level at 25. So in short, the Montblanc's display is very much in line with its peers and offers great readability. That said, keep in mind that e-ink panels often show measurable variation even within the same product line, so those numbers I measured might still be slightly different with other devices. As for ghosting, it's also pretty typical of Carta 1300. That means it's slightly more pronounced than Carta 1200. But Montblanc has implemented a smart workaround, a quick refresh feature you can trigger directly from the pen. More on that in a second. But the short version is, ghosting is pretty much the same as on the Supernote Manta and Viwood's AI paper. Not great, but much better than on the Booksnote Max. There's a paper-like texture on the display, which looks and feels very similar to the one of the Remarkable 2. So same as with the competitor, the Montblanc digital paper's display is slightly soft to the touch, diffusing incoming light and provides a nice writing experience. More on that later. After optionally logging into your Montblanc account and setting up a 4-digit passcode, you're taken to the home screen. And immediately, you can see that the minimalist design language from the setup continues throughout the user interface. It reminds me a little of Remarkable's approach, though not in a way that feels like a copy. The UI feels polished and thoughtfully laid out. It's clear that Montblanc put serious effort into creating something well-organized with an intentional focus on essentials. This isn't trying to compete with books in terms of feature depth, it's more aligned with the audience that appreciates a focused, distraction-free experience. Think more in the realm of Remarkable users. One potential issue for some users could be the scaling of the user interface. Elements are relatively small and in some cases quite thin. Personally, I like the clean look and have no trouble finding what I need, but if you're farsighted or have any visual impairments, the UI might feel difficult to read comfortably at times. Swiping down from the top on the home screen reveals the control center where you can lock screen orientation and access the settings. From the home screen, you can create notebooks, quick notes, and folders to keep things organized. There's also a search function, which I'll get into in just a moment. Now let's talk about the pen integration, because it's actually one of the standard features of this tablet. Starting a quick note is as simple as double pressing the button on top of the pen. It's super convenient and honestly, it feels great to use. We haven't really seen this kind of pen-based interaction at this level before in the e-ink space. Sticking with the pen for a second, a single press of that same top button brings you back to the home screen and a long press refreshes the display. You can remap those functions along with the rocker button on the side of the pen. That said, Montblanc has limited which actions you can assign to each type of press. You can't freely map any function to any button, which feels unnecessarily restrictive. I don't see a good reason for that, and it would add a lot more flexibility if users had full control. Another small issue I had was the need for the pen to be very close to the tablet to trigger the rocker button's functions. While it works most of the time, sometimes I lifted the pen just a bit too far. We're talking about half a centimeter here, and that meant the action wasn't registered, costing me more time waiting and trying it again than to just use the regular route. Still, even with those limitations, this setup works really well and genuinely improves the overall user experience. And I wouldn't be surprised if other brands follow suit. Remarkable and Books have already moved to active pens, so adding pen-specific features like this feels like a natural next step. The pen also provides haptic feedback on some actions, so you know when something was triggered. You can turn haptic feedback off in the settings, but generally I found it to be another nice addition. This shouldn't be confused with haptic feedback we saw on the BooksTab XC. So the pen's vibration motor isn't constantly vibrating while writing. Back to note-taking. Opening a notebook or quick note gives you access to a top toolbar with various options. You can choose different pen types: fountain pen, calligraphy, pencil, ballpoint, fine liner, and highlighter, and adjust stroke thickness and color. Pressure sensitivity is supported and works well, though tilt detection is too subtle for my taste. Almost not noticeable and better tuned on most other devices. Depending on how you've configured the pen buttons, you can also quickly switch between tools, return home, or trigger a screen refresh. It's a very fluid setup once you get used to it. The toolbar can be hidden, just like on Remarkable, by tapping the icon in the corner, but you can't move it around the screen at this point, which would have been nice. There's a wide selection of templates available, and all of them feel high quality and carefully designed. You can also set the notebook's cover either to the first or last page, or choose from different predefined cover pages. Notes can be sent via email to specific recipients, and companion apps are available for both Android and iOS. These allow you to access your notes to send them somewhere and transfer files to the device, although file uploads are capped at 100 megabytes. But there's definitely some fine-tuning needed here, because when sending notebooks, they need to be converted first, and depending on the size of the notebook, that can take a bit of time. And for larger notebooks, that conversion might even fail if the output exceeds 25 megabytes. If that's the case, you need to export it via USB, for which there's a size limit of 2 gigs. But I'd say that's a more reasonable limit than the 25 megabytes. A 100-page notebook I tested it with had roughly 37 megabytes. You can also share individual pages via email by selecting them in the page overview. Exporting notebooks is only possible while you're connected via USB, and it can take a while to convert larger ones. Exporting the mentioned 100-page notebook took just over 70 seconds, which felt a bit too long, especially because there's no indicator to show you the progress of that export on the device. And that's pretty much it for note-taking. There are no layers, no tags, no table of contents, no interlinking between notes, and so on. It's a minimal and focused writing experience. But there is one major feature that stands out, and that's handwriting search. You can open the search function from the home screen and write directly into the search field. Or if you prefer, you can use the on-screen keyboard. That's, by the way, possible with all input fields I tried, which is a nice touch. Either way, the tablet will scan your handwritten notes and look for the term you entered. This is an incredibly useful feature for a note-taking tablet. And unlike the Remarkable, it doesn't cost extra. Granted, the Montblanc digital paper already comes at a premium, so it should be included. But still, it's great to have. Like everything else on the device, the handwriting search is a bit simplified. It doesn't highlight the search term on the page or give you much in the way of advanced results, but it does work. And it works well. I'd even say that this is the most reliable and quickest implementation of this feature I've seen on any eink tablet so far. And more importantly, the handwriting recognition runs entirely on-device. So you don't need to be online for it to work, and results show up almost instantly. You can write something down and search for it seconds later, and it'll appear in the results. That's a huge usability win. And honestly, it goes a long way toward making up for the features that are missing. Now let's talk about writing feel, because this is where the Montblanc digital paper stands out the most. With a pen latency of around 23 milliseconds, it's among the fastest in the e-ink note-taking space. But more impressive is the overall writing experience. The screen has a subtle paper-like texture, and you also get the option for 3 different pen nib hardness levels, and one of each comes in the box. This allows you to customize the writing feel based on your own preference. Personally, I think the default nib that's pre-installed in the pen strikes a good balance between resistance, sound, and writing feel. The other 2 nib options are matte and smooth, which are color-coded with orange and blue dots on the side. I actually like the matte nib with the orange dot the most. It's the quietest and gives the most resistance, even if it feels a bit detached. The smooth nib glides over the screen the easiest and gives the most feedback. And for some reason, Montblanc translated smooth to soft on the German website, which made me expect something different, more in line with what the matte nib provides. But each one feels distinct, and it's clear that Montblanc spent a lot of time optimizing this part of the experience rather than using existing solutions that are already available on the market. And I think they succeeded because writing feels genuinely good no matter which nib you choose. And depending on your preference, there's probably one that will feel just right for you. Overall, these nibs provide a different experience to most other tablets on the market, and I'd say come indeed closer to that analog writing feel Montblanc was most likely aiming for. The only slight downside when it comes to the writing experience is inherent to using a capacitive pen. Same as on the Remarkable Paper Pro or Bookstep XC, you see a slight wobble with diagonal lines on the Montblanc digital paper as well. It's not really noticeable when writing, but might be a bit more obvious when sketching. Other than that, accuracy of the pen is great, so writing a little smaller is also not an issue. And palm rejection is also working well. So I had no issues or unusual behaviors when putting my palm on the screen to write. The tablet also supports PDF and ePub files without DRM, but functionality is very rudimentary. You can annotate pages directly with the pen, or add pinned notes with the on-screen keyboard and adapt the text styling in ePub files as well. You can rotate to landscape too, but only manually through the menu, not automatically when rotating the tablet. And even then, without any zoom functionality available whatsoever, landscape mode for PDFs is somewhat pointless right now. So all in all, there's a lot room for improvement on the software side when it comes to feature richness, both for the writing and the reading features. As I mentioned earlier, the battery is rated at 3700 milliamp hours. In my writing robot test, I got up to 10 hours of continuous handwriting, which is very good, even for an e-ink note taker, and quite an achievement for a new product from a company that hasn't done this before. The 40 milliamp hours battery of the pen should last around 45 hours with one charge. But since the stylus is automatically charged when placed in the sidebar, this is nothing you have to think about. For reading ePubs, I measured around 22 hours, which is on the lower end for this type of tablet, especially when comparing it to the great writing performance. Which brings us to the conclusion. And much like with my review of the remarkable Paper Pro Move, check it out if you haven't already, we have to talk about the price. This tablet comes from a luxury pen manufacturer, and that's reflected in the pricing. The tablet and pen together cost 890 euros, which is a lot. And if you want the matching cover, which most people probably will, that's another 200 euros. So we're comfortably over the 1000 euros mark here. Now, Montblanc isn't the first company to release an e-ink device in that price range. But at this level, you usually expect more utility. So the question is, does this matter to you? Unlike with remarkable Supernote or books, I don't think productivity is the core focus here. The Montblanc digital paper is clearly aimed at delivering a minimalist, analog-inspired writing experience, and doing so under the umbrella of a luxury brand. And if you're the kind of person this product is aimed at, the price probably isn't your main concern. Bottom line, this is a beautifully constructed, surprisingly refined first step into the digital note-taking space. That would actually already be impressive coming from a tech company, but coming from a brand that has an entirely different market focus, even more so. Of all the things, my only real disappointment is the digital pen itself. And to be clear, I have never owned a Montblanc pen, so this isn't coming from direct comparison. But given Montblanc's reputation as one of the world's most iconic luxury pen makers, I just expected more. The pen feels a bit cheap, and while the design is clean, the plasticky feel and lightweight build don't match the premium image the brand is known for. I suspect a bit more weight would have gone a long way here, especially when you compare it to something like Supernote's heavy Heart of Metal pen, which feels far more premium and costs significantly less. So if you're aware of the limitations and are comfortable with the premium price tag and want something that for the most part feels luxurious and refined, the Montblanc digital paper is definitely worth a closer look. The cloud services are hosted in Germany, the handwriting search works well and entirely offline, and the writing experience with the different nib options is without a doubt one of the best out there. But if you don't care about the Montblanc brand and have no particular attachment to it, you're probably better off going with one of the many other e-ink tablets available today. The writing feel might not be quite as polished, but you'll likely get a lot more in terms of functionality and features for a much lower price. So what do you think about the Montblanc digital paper? Let us know in the comments below. Like and subscribe if you found this review helpful, and don't forget to stick around for future comparisons and breakdowns. Thanks for your time watching, and I'll see you in the next one.